When Isabel Grant collapsed behind that weather-beaten barn in Montana Territory, blood soaking through her torn dress and bruises painting her skin purple and black, she never imagined the cowboy who found her there would change everything. One moment of desperation, one man's quiet kindness, one vow that started as protection but became something far more dangerous: love. This is the story of how a broken girl found her strength, and how a lonely rancher discovered that sometimes salvation comes barefoot and bleeding, hiding in the shadows of your own land. Stay with me until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Isabel's story travels across this world. The dust rose in angry clouds behind Isabel Grant's bare feet as she ran, each step sending shockwaves of pain through her battered body. The Montana sun beat down mercilessly on her exposed shoulders, where her dress had been torn clean through, the fabric hanging in shreds that caught the hot wind. Behind her, somewhere in the shimmering heat haze, she could still hear him, her stepfather's voice, slurred with whiskey and rage, calling her name like a curse. "Isabel, you get back here, girl. You hear me? I ain't done with you yet." But she was done with him. God help her, she was finally done. Her lungs burned as she pushed herself harder, faster, though her body screamed for her to stop. The dirt road stretched endlessly before her, wavering in the afternoon heat, offering no shelter, no salvation. Just more dust, more emptiness, more of the God-forsaken Montana territory that had become her prison over the past 3 years. 3 years since her mother had died. 3 years since Darius Grant had shown his true colors. 3 years of walking on eggshells, of flinching at shadows, of wearing long sleeves in summer to hide the marks his belt left behind. But this morning had been different. This morning, when he'd reached for his whip, the same one he used on the horses, something inside Isabel had simply snapped. She'd grabbed the cast iron skillet from the stove and swung it with every ounce of strength she possessed, catching him square in the shoulder. The look of shock on his face would have been satisfying if she hadn't been so terrified of what would come next. She hadn't waited to find out. She'd run. Now, as the adrenaline began to fade and the reality of her situation set in, Isabel felt her steps faltering. Where was she even going? She had no money, no shoes, no plan beyond the desperate primal need to get away. The nearest town was Copper Ridge, at least 10 miles down this road, and she'd maybe covered 2. Her feet were already bleeding, leaving dark spots in the pale dust behind her. Through the haze of exhaustion and pain, something caught her eye. A structure rising from the empty landscape like a mirage. A barn, old and weathered, its red paint faded to the color of dried blood, but solid, real. Isabel changed direction, stumbling off the road and across the scrubland toward it. Sagebrush grabbed at her torn skirt. Rocks bit into her feet, but she kept moving, driven by an instinct older than thought, the need to hide, to burrow into darkness, to make herself small and invisible until the danger passed. The barn sat alone. No house visible anywhere nearby, just the structure itself standing sentinel over the empty land. As she drew closer, Isabel could see it was old but well-maintained, the wood still sound despite its weathered appearance. Whoever owned it cared enough to keep it from falling into ruin. She rounded the corner to the backside, away from the road, and her legs finally gave out. Isabel collapsed against the barn wall, sliding down until she sat in a crumpled heap in the narrow strip of shade the building provided. Her breath came in ragged gasps that hurt her ribs, cracked, maybe, from where he'd kicked her that morning. Her back felt like it was on fire where the dress fabric stuck to the wounds from his belt buckle the night before. For a long moment, she simply sat there, too exhausted to move, too hurt to think clearly. The world seemed to spin around her, the sky wheeling overhead in a dizzying blue arc. She closed her eyes and pressed her forehead to her knees, willing herself not to pass out, not to give up, not yet. Time became meaningless. It might have been minutes or hours that she sat there, consciousness fading in and out like a guttering candle. The shade crept across the ground as the sun moved overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried out. The wind whispered through the dry grass with a sound like rushing water. Then, cutting through her dazed state, she heard it. Footsteps. Not the stumbling, uneven gait of a drunk man. These were measured, purposeful, the steps of someone who knew exactly where they were going. They came around the side of the barn with steady confidence, then stopped. Isabel's eyes flew open and she tried to scramble backward, but her body wouldn't cooperate. All she could do was look up at the figure standing over her, silhouetted against the bright sky. "Ma'am?" The voice was deep, carrying the slow, careful cadence of someone who'd learned that soft words worked better than loud ones. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" As her eyes adjusted, Isabel could make out more details. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a battered hat that shadowed his face. Work-worn clothes that had seen their share of honest labor. Strong hands that hung loose at his sides, making no move toward her. He took a step back as if sensing her fear and removed his hat. The gesture revealed a face weathered by sun and wind, probably somewhere in his early 30s, with dark hair and eyes the color of creek water. That shifting green-brown that changed with the light. There was no cruelty in those eyes, no calculation, just concern, genuine and unguarded. "You're bleeding," he said, his voice gentler now. "Let me help." Isabel tried to speak, but her throat was too dry, too tight with fear and exhaustion. When she finally managed words, they came out as barely more than a whisper. "He'll kill me if he finds me." Something flickered across the man's face, anger, but not directed at her. His jaw tightened, and when he spoke again, there was steel beneath the gentleness. "He won't find you here. You're safe now." "You don't understand. I understand enough." He crouched down, still maintaining distance, still respecting her fear. "I understand a woman doesn't run barefoot through the territory in the heat of the day unless she's got no other choice. I understand those bruises on your arms didn't come from falling off a horse. And I understand that whoever put them there doesn't deserve to call himself a man." Isabel stared at him, this stranger with kind eyes, and a voice that didn't demand or threaten, just offered. It had been so long since anyone had offered her anything without expecting payment in return that she'd almost forgotten what simple kindness looked like. "My name's Caleb Holt," he continued, settling back on his heels. "This is my barn you're hiding behind, and that's my ranch house, about a quarter mile that way." He gestured vaguely behind him. "I've got a housekeeper named Eleanor who can tend to those wounds proper. Got a spare room that locks from the inside. And I give you my word, ma'am, that no one will hurt you under my roof." "I don't even know you," Isabel managed, though even as she said it, she was trying to push herself upright, her body making the decision her mind was still struggling with. "No, ma'am, you don't. But I know enough about desperation to recognize it when I see it, and I know enough about honor to know when it calls on me to act." Caleb stood slowly, extending his hand but not reaching for her. "Come with me. At least get those wounds cleaned and some water in you. After that, if you want to leave, I'll saddle you a horse and give you supplies for wherever you're headed." Isabel looked at his outstretched hand, calloused and scarred from years of ranch work, steady as stone. She thought about Darius, probably still searching for her, growing more enraged with every passing hour. She thought about the long, empty road ahead, and her bleeding feet, and the sun that would kill her as surely as any whip if she stayed out in it much longer. She thought about her mother, who taught her to recognize goodness when she saw it, even when it came in unexpected forms. "Isabel," she whispered, placing her torn and bloodied hand in his. "My name is Isabel Grant." Caleb's grip was firm but careful, mindful of her injuries as he helped her to her feet. When she swayed, he steadied her with a hand at her elbow, nothing more. "Well, Miss Grant, let's get you somewhere safe." The walk to the ranch house was slow, punctuated by Isabel's gasps of pain when her weight came down wrong on her injured feet. Caleb noticed but said nothing, just adjusted his pace to match hers, his presence solid and reassuring beside her. The house, when it came into view, was nothing grand. A simple two-story structure with a wide porch, built to withstand the harsh Montana winters and hotter summers. But it was well kept, with curtains in the windows and a vegetable garden growing behind a neat fence. Signs of a life built with care and intention. As they approached, the front door swung open and a woman emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. She was somewhere in her 50s, with steel gray hair pulled back in a no-nonsense bun and sharp blue eyes that took in Isabel's condition in a single sweeping glance. "Sweet, merciful heaven," she breathed, hurrying down the steps. "Caleb, what—" "Found her behind the barn, Eleanor. She needs help." Caleb's words were economical, but his tone carried weight. "Can you—" "Of course I can. What kind of question is that?" Eleanor was already moving, all efficiency and competence. She took Isabel's other arm with the practiced gentleness of someone who'd tended many injuries over the years. Come on, dear, let's get you inside and cleaned up. Caleb, heat water, lots of it. Already on it, he said, moving past them toward what must have been the kitchen. Eleanor guided Isabel through the front door and into a parlor that was simple but comfortable, with worn furniture that invited sitting and a bookshelf crammed with volumes that had clearly been read and reread. She didn't stop there, though, leading Isabel down a short hallway to a bedroom that was small but bright, with a window overlooking the vegetable garden. Sit, Eleanor commanded, pointing to the bed. Carefully now. Don't want you bleeding all over the quilt. Not that it matters compared to you, but habit, you understand. Isabel sank onto the edge of the bed, and the softness of it nearly undid her. When was the last time she'd sat on something that wasn't hardwood or ground? When was the last time someone had told her to sit without it being a prelude to punishment? Eleanor disappeared and returned moments later with her arms full, clean cloths, a basin, a bundle of clothes that looked like they might actually fit. Start by telling me your name if you're comfortable with that. Isabel. Isabel Grant. Well, Miss Isabel, I'm Eleanor Walsh, and I've been keeping house for Caleb Holt for going on 8 years now. He's a good man, as I suspect you're beginning to figure out, though stubborn as a mule when he sets his mind to something. She set the basin down and began laying out supplies with practiced efficiency. Now, I need to see those wounds. That dress is ruined anyway, so don't worry about it. Can you manage, or do you need help? Isabel's fingers trembled as she reached for the buttons of her dress. What few remained intact. I can manage. I'll be just outside then. Call if you need me. And don't be shy about it. I raised 3 sons and tended more injuries than I can count. Nothing you've got will shock me. When Eleanor stepped into the hallway, pulling the door most of the way closed but leaving it slightly ajar, respect for privacy balanced with concern for Isabel's condition, Isabel finally let herself look at the damage. Her dress, when she peeled it away from her skin, was stuck to several wounds with dried blood. The removal of it brought fresh tears to her eyes, but she bit down on her lip to keep from crying out. Beneath, her body was a canvas of violence. Bruises in every shade from fresh purple to sickly yellow-green, cuts and scrapes, and across her back, the distinctive marks of a belt buckle, some scabbed over, some still weeping. She'd known it was bad. She hadn't realized it was this bad. A knock at the door made her jump. "Water's here," Caleb's voice called. "I'm leaving it outside the door." "Thank you," Eleanor's voice replied, and Isabel heard the sound of the bucket being lifted. A moment later, the housekeeper re-entered, steam rising from the container she carried. She took one look at Isabel's back, and her lips compressed into a thin line. "That man who did this," Eleanor said quietly, pouring warm water into the basin. "He have a name?" "My stepfather, Darius Grant." Eleanor nodded slowly, wringing out a cloth. "And you ran." "I hit him with a skillet and ran." For the first time, a small smile ghosted across Eleanor's stern features. "Good for you, girl. Now, this is going to hurt something fierce, but it needs doing. Those wounds need cleaning before they fester. You go ahead and yell if you need to. These walls are thick, and there's no shame in honest pain." Isabel gripped the edge of the bed and nodded. Eleanor was right. It hurt. It hurt worse than the initial injuries in some ways, the warm water finding every cut and abrasion, the gentle pressure needed to clean the wound sending fire across Isabel's nerve endings. But Eleanor's hands were sure and kind, and she talked as she worked, filling the silence with steady commentary about the ranch, the weather, the stubborn rooster who kept getting into the vegetable garden. "There now," she said finally, wrapping clean bandages around Isabel's ribs and back. "That's the worst of it done. You've got some cracked ribs, I think, but there's not much to do for those except wrap them and let time do its work. The cuts will heal, though some might scar. You're young and strong, you'll mend." She helped Isabel into a clean dress, one that had clearly belonged to someone else once, probably Eleanor herself when she was younger and not as comfortably rounded. It was simple calico, faded from many washings but clean and soft, and it fit reasonably well. "Now then," Eleanor said, gathering up the soiled cloths and ruined dress, "you lie down and rest. I'll bring you some broth and bread. You look like you haven't eaten properly in days. I haven't. The admission came quietly. He didn't like to waste food on me. Eleanor's face went hard as stone. That man deserves a reckoning. He'll come looking for me. Let him come. This ranch doesn't sit in the middle of nowhere by accident. Caleb chose this spot because he values his privacy and the privacy of others. Your stepfather comes here, he'll find 3 men who know how to shoot and 1 woman who knows where to aim. She paused at the door. You rest now. You're safe here, Isabel. I promise you that. When the door closed behind Eleanor, Isabel finally allowed herself to lie back on the bed, to sink into its softness, to close her eyes without fear of what might happen while they were closed. The pain in her body was still there, sharp and insistent, but beneath it was something she hadn't felt in 3 long years. Relief. She must have dozed because the next thing she knew, the light slanting through the window had changed, grown longer and more golden. Evening was coming on, and sitting in a chair beside the bed, reading a book with her spectacles perched on her nose, was Eleanor. Welcome back, the housekeeper said, marking her place and setting the book aside. How's the pain? Tolerable. Isabel tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, pressing a hand to her wrapped ribs. Easy does it. Here, I brought broth like I promised, and there's fresh bread. You need to eat slowly. Your stomach won't thank you for rushing after going hungry. The broth was rich and savory, the bread soft and still warm. Isabel ate slowly, as instructed, but it was difficult not to wolf it down when every sip, every bite, tasted like the finest thing she'd ever consumed. Eleanor watched with satisfaction, occasionally refilling the bowl from a pot she'd kept warm by the small stove in the corner of the room. Eleanor, Isabel said between bites, why is he doing this? Caleb, I mean. He doesn't know me. I could be a danger, a criminal, a liar. Eleanor shook her head. Caleb's got good instincts about people. Always has. He took one look at you and saw someone who needed help, and that's all he needed to see. But surely he must want something in return. Not the way you're thinking. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, considering her words. Caleb's a complicated man in some ways, simple in others. Lost his parents young, built this ranch from nothing, lives by a code that says you help folks who need help. That's it. No strings, no expectations. Just basic human decency, which I realize must seem in short supply from where you're sitting. Isabel set down the empty bowl, her hands trembling slightly. I tried to stand up to him, Darius, my stepfather. I tried so many times. But he was always stronger, always meaner, always had me convinced that I deserved it somehow, that I was the problem. You weren't the problem, dear. You were never the problem. This morning he went for his whip. The same one he uses on the horses. And I couldn't anymore. I couldn't let him. Isabel's voice broke. So I hit him, hard as I could, and then I ran because I knew if I stayed, if he caught me, he'd kill me this time. He'd actually kill me. Eleanor reached across and took Isabel's hand, her grip firm and warm. You did the right thing, the brave thing. Running isn't cowardice when you're running toward life instead of staying for death. A knock at the door interrupted them. Eleanor? Caleb's voice called. Everything all right in there? Come in, Caleb. She's awake and decent. The door opened and Caleb entered, his hat in his hands, his expression carefully neutral. He'd cleaned up since Isabel had last seen him, washed the dust from his face and hands, though his clothes were still work-worn. Miss Grant, how are you feeling? Better, thank you. And please, just Isabel. He nodded, his eyes serious. That's Isabel, then. I wanted to talk to you about your situation, if you're up to it. Something in his tone made Isabel's stomach clench. He was in town, wasn't he? Darius. Caleb pulled the chair from the small desk against the wall and sat down, keeping a respectful distance. I rode into Copper Ridge this afternoon to pick up some supplies. Your stepfather was there, all right, making quite a scene at the sheriff's office. Of course he was, Isabel said bitterly. Let me guess. I'm the villain in his story. I stole something, or I'm ungrateful, or I'm mad, or all of the above, near as I could tell. He's claiming you took money and some family heirlooms that belonged to your late mother, and that you're mentally unwell and dangerous. Isabel felt her hands clenching into fists, her nails biting into her palms. I didn't take anything. I ran with nothing but the clothes on my back, and the only thing unwell about me is that I stayed as long as I did. I believe you, Caleb said simply. Problem is, the law doesn't always care what's true versus what gets claimed. Sheriff Dawson seems like a decent enough man, but he's got to follow procedure. Your stepfather's filed a formal complaint, which means Dawson has to investigate. So he'll come here. Eventually, yes. I didn't tell anyone I'd found you. Figured that was your story to tell when you're ready. But Copper Ridge is small. Word will get around that I took in a stranger. 2 and 2 will get put together. Isabel closed her eyes, exhaustion and despair washing over her. I'll go then, tonight. I won't bring trouble to your door. You'll do no such thing, Eleanor said sharply. You can barely walk, girl, and it's a good 30 miles to the next town. You wouldn't make it 5. Eleanor's right, Caleb agreed. Besides, there's another way. What way? He shifted uncomfortably, rolling the brim of his hat between his hands. Law in the Montana Territory is pretty clear about a few things. One of them is that a husband has legal authority over his wife. If you were married, your stepfather would have no claim on you anymore. He couldn't force you to return, couldn't press charges on your behalf, couldn't do much of anything except rage about it. Isabel stared at him, not quite believing what she was hearing. You're suggesting I get married? To who? I don't... She stopped as understanding dawned. To you. You're suggesting I marry you. A marriage in name only, Caleb said quickly. Legal protection, nothing more. We'd draw up papers making it clear that you're free to leave whenever you want, that you have no obligations beyond staying safe. It would just be a way to keep you out of his reach until he gives up or moves on or whatever it is men like that do. That's insane. Maybe, but it would work. Isabel looked between Caleb and Eleanor, searching for the trap, the hidden agenda, the real cost of this protection. But all she saw in Caleb's face was earnest concern, and in Eleanor's firm approval. Why would you do this? Isabel asked. Tie yourself to a stranger, risk your reputation just to help someone you found bleeding behind your barn. Caleb was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. When he spoke, his voice was soft. 10 years ago, I had a sister, Emma. She married young to a man who seemed decent enough at first. By the time we realized what he really was, it was too late. She died in what everyone called an accident. Fell down the stairs, they said. Broke her neck. Oh, God, Isabel whispered. I knew, Caleb continued, his voice rough with old grief. I knew what he'd done, but I couldn't prove it. The law said it was an accident, said a husband's home was his castle, said there was nothing to be done. I let my sister marry a monster, and I let her die because I didn't act fast enough, didn't see the signs early enough. He looked up, meeting Isabel's eyes directly. I can't save Emma, but I can keep you safe. And maybe that's selfish of me. Maybe I'm doing this as much for my own peace of mind as for your protection. But does the reason really matter if the outcome is you staying alive? Isabel felt tears pricking at her eyes. You'd marry me out of guilt for your sister? I'd marry you out of principle, he corrected. The principle that says no one deserves what was done to you, and the principle that says when you have the power to stop suffering, you use it. But marriage, even a paper marriage, that's not a small thing. No, it's not. But neither is letting you walk back out into danger because I was too concerned with propriety to do what needed doing. Eleanor cleared her throat. If I may, the boy's right, Isabel. It's not a perfect solution, but it's the best one available. And Caleb's word is solid as bedrock. If he says it's protection only, that's what it is. No pressure, no expectations, no demands. Isabel looked down at her bandaged hands, thinking about her mother, who'd been so in love with Darius at first, who'd believed his promises and his charm right up until the day she'd grown too sick to be worth keeping around, who'd died with bruises hidden under her nightgown that Isabel had only seen when preparing her body for burial. Her mother had chosen wrong, had trusted the wrong man, believed the wrong promises, and it had killed her as surely as the fever that had taken her in the end. But was Caleb the same? Every instinct Isabel had said no, said that this man, with his careful distance and his honest eyes and his dead sister's memory driving him to act, was something different, something better. If I say yes, Isabel said slowly, what happens? How does this work? Caleb leaned forward. We ride into Copper Ridge tomorrow morning. Go straight to the sheriff's office with Eleanor as a witness. You tell Sheriff Dawson that your stepfather's claims are lies, that you left because of his abuse. I tell him that we're engaged to be married, that you're under my protection now. We get the license, find a preacher, make it legal and binding. Just like that? Just like that. You'll have my name, my protection, and my word that you're free to make your own choices from that point forward. When the danger's past, when your stepfather gives up or moves on, we can have the marriage quietly annulled if that's what you want, or not. Whatever you choose. Isabel took a shaky breath. Can I think about it? Just until morning? Of course, Caleb stood, settling his hat back on his head. You take all the time you need. But Isabel, he paused at the door. Whatever you decide, you're welcome here as long as you need a safe place to be. Marriage or no marriage, that doesn't change. When he left, Eleanor reached over and patted Isabel's hand. Get some rest, dear. Morning will bring clarity. It usually does. But Isabel didn't sleep much that night. She lay in the soft bed in the clean nightgown Eleanor had provided and thought about choices. About the choice her mother had made, and the choices Darius had stolen from her, and the choice Caleb was offering now. By dawn, when the first light crept through the window, she'd made her decision. The morning air was cool when Isabel finally rose from the bed, her body still aching but her mind clear. She'd spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, weighing her options, and by the time the rooster crowed, that same stubborn bird Eleanor had complained about, she knew what she had to do. Eleanor was already in the kitchen when Isabel emerged, dressed in the borrowed calico dress, her hair brushed and braided as neatly as her trembling hands could manage. The housekeeper looked up from the stove where she was frying eggs and bacon, her sharp eyes assessing Isabel's face. You've decided, Eleanor said. It wasn't a question. I have. Isabel moved to the table and sat down carefully, mindful of her wrapped ribs. I'll marry him, if the offer still stands. Eleanor nodded once, approval clear in her expression. Smart girl. Caleb's already up and about, been in the barn since before dawn. Nervous energy, I'd wager, though he'd never admit it. I'll send word for him to come in for breakfast. 20 minutes later, the three of them sat around the kitchen table, the morning light streaming through the windows and painting everything in shades of gold. Caleb had cleaned up again, put on what was clearly his best shirt, still work-worn but freshly pressed, and his hair was damp from washing. He kept his eyes on his plate, pushing eggs around with his fork. I want to do it, Isabel said, her voice steady despite the way her heart hammered in her chest. The marriage. If you're still willing. Caleb's fork stilled. He looked up, meeting her gaze. I'm willing. Are you sure? This isn't a decision to make lightly, even under the circumstances. I've been making it all night. It's not light. Nothing about this situation is light. But it's the right choice. The smart choice. Isabel folded her hands on the table, her knuckles white. I won't go back to him, Caleb. I'd rather die out in the territory than go back to that house, to that life. If marrying you keeps me free, then that's what I'll do. Eleanor reached over and squeezed Isabel's shoulder. Brave girl. Not brave, Isabel said quietly. Just desperate. Sometimes they're the same thing, Caleb said. He pushed back from the table and stood. All right then. We'll ride into Copper Ridge this morning. Eleanor, you'll need to come as a witness. I'll hitch up the wagon. Isabel shouldn't be riding horseback with those ribs. Already thought of that, Eleanor said, rising to clear the plates. I'll pack some provisions for the trip. And Isabel, dear, I've got a dress that might be more suitable for a wedding, even a hasty one. Nothing fancy, but it's got lace on the collar and it's a nice blue color. You should have something special to wear. You don't have to. Hush. Let an old woman have her small kindnesses. An hour later, Isabel stood in the bedroom wearing a dress the color of a clear summer sky, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. It fit better than the calico had, and when she caught sight of herself in the small mirror above the dresser, she barely recognized the woman looking back. Clean, dressed in something pretty, her bruises partially hidden by the high collar, She looked almost normal, almost like someone who might actually be getting married for real reasons, not out of desperation and legal necessity. The wagon ride to Copper Ridge took just over 2 hours, the horses moving at a steady pace along the dusty road. Caleb drove, his hands sure on the reins, while Eleanor sat beside him. Isabel sat in the back, cushioned by blankets Eleanor had insisted on bringing, watching the territory roll past. It was strange seeing this landscape in daylight without fear chasing her. The scrubland had a harsh beauty to it, the pale gold of dried grass, the dark green of juniper and pine in the distance, the endless blue dome of sky overhead. Hawks wheeled on thermal currents, and once she saw a small herd of pronghorn antelope bounding across the plain, their white rumps flashing in the sun. "You ever been to Copper Ridge before?" Caleb asked over his shoulder, breaking the companionable silence. "Once, with my mother, before she married Darius. It seemed bigger then, but I was younger. Everything seems bigger when you're a child. It's grown some since then, probably. New folks moving in, drawn by the mining operations up in the hills. It's still small, though. Everyone knows everyone else's business, which works in our favor today." Isabel understood what he meant. In a small town, a marriage announcement would spread fast. By nightfall, everyone in Copper Ridge would know that Isabel Grant had married Caleb Holt, including Darius. As they crested a low rise, the town came into view. A collection of wooden buildings clustered along the main road, with a white church steeple rising above them like a finger pointing at heaven. Smoke rose from chimneys, horses were tied at hitching posts. People moved about their business, living ordinary lives that didn't involve running or hiding or making desperate choices. Caleb guided the wagon down the main street, nodding to folks who called out greetings. Isabel kept her head down, acutely aware of the stares, the curious glances. Word would already be spreading. Caleb Holt had brought a woman to town, and Eleanor Walsh was with them, dressed in her Sunday best. The sheriff's office was a squat wooden building near the center of town, with barred windows and a sign hanging over the door that creaked in the breeze. Caleb pulled the wagon to a stop in front of it and set the brake. "You ready?" he asked Isabel. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He helped her down from the wagon, his hands careful on her waist, steadying her when she swayed slightly. Eleanor came around the other side, linking her arm through Isabel's in a gesture of support. "Chin up, dear," the housekeeper murmured. "You've got nothing to be ashamed of and everything to be proud of." The sheriff's office was dim inside, the windows small and the single lamp not yet lit despite the shadows. Behind a battered desk sat a man in his 50s with a thick mustache and tired eyes. He looked up as they entered, his expression shifting from boredom to interest. "Caleb," he said, rising. "Eleanor, and who's this young lady?" "Sheriff Dawson." Caleb removed his hat. "This is Isabel Grant. I believe you heard about her yesterday." Recognition flickered across the sheriff's face, followed by wariness. "Miss Grant? Your stepfather was here yesterday, quite concerned about your whereabouts. Said you'd run off with some family valuables." "He lied." Isabel's voice came out stronger than she'd expected. "I took nothing but my life, Sheriff, and I ran because if I'd stayed, he would have killed me." Dawson's eyes narrowed. "That's a serious accusation." "Look at her arms, Sheriff," Caleb said quietly. "Look at the way she moves, like every breath hurts. Those aren't accidents." Isabel pushed up the sleeves of her dress, revealing the bruises that mottled her skin in shades of purple and yellow. She saw the sheriff's expression change, saw the moment he stopped seeing her as a runaway and started seeing her as a victim. "He did this?" Dawson asked, his voice rough. "He did worse. These are just what show." Isabel pulled her sleeves back down. "I'm 19 years old, Sheriff. By law, I'm of age and can make my own choices. My choice is to never go back to that house, to that man. And before you tell me you have to investigate his claims, I'm here to tell you they're false. I took nothing. I am nothing to him but a target for his rage, and I won't be that anymore." Dawson sat back down slowly, rubbing his face with one weathered hand. "Miss Grant, I believe you. I've seen men like your stepfather before, all charm in public, all cruelty at home. Problem is, the law's not always on the side of justice. He's filed formal charges. I have to follow up on them." Not if she's married, Caleb interjected. A married woman is under her husband's protection, not her father's. Her stepfather would have no legal standing to make claims about her. The sheriff's eyebrows rose. You two getting married? That's the plan. Today, if possible. With your blessing and a preacher willing to perform the ceremony. Dawson looked between them, his eyes sharp and assessing. He wasn't a stupid man, Isabel realized. He knew this wasn't a love match, knew exactly what they were doing and why. The question was whether he'd help or hinder. After a long moment, the sheriff nodded slowly. Reverend Matthews is in town today. Saw him heading to the mercantile about an hour ago. You'll need a license, which I can provide, and 2 witnesses. I assume Eleanor's one? I am, Eleanor said firmly. And I'll stand as the other, Dawson said, surprising them all. If this is what you want, Miss Grant, truly want, not being coerced into, then I'll support it. Your stepfather strikes me as the type who doesn't take no for an answer, and I'd rather see you safe than see him get his way through legal manipulation. Relief flooded through Isabel so intensely she felt dizzy. Thank you, Sheriff. Truly. Dawson pulled out a form and began filling it in with careful script. Names, ages, places of birth, standard information. Caleb, I know yours already. Miss Grant, you'll need to provide yours. Isabel gave the information, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. She watched as the sheriff filled out the marriage license, making their arrangement official before the ceremony had even happened. It felt surreal, watching her name appear next to Caleb's on the paper, linked by law and necessity. There, Dawson signed with a flourish and stamped the document with his official seal. Legal and binding once Reverend Matthews performs the ceremony. Speaking of which, he pulled out his pocket watch and consulted it. He should be finishing up at the mercantile about now. Why don't we head over there and see if he's free? They found Reverend Matthews coming out of the store, his arms full of packages. He was younger than Isabel had expected, maybe 40, with kind eyes and a gentle smile that widened when he saw the sheriff approaching. Sheriff Dawson, what can I do for you? Got a couple here needs marrying, Reverend. Today, if you're able. It's somewhat urgent. The Reverend's eyes moved to Caleb and Isabel, taking in their mismatched heights. Caleb tall and broad, Isabel slight and bruised, and the way Eleanor stood protectively close to the younger woman. Whatever he saw in their faces must have satisfied him, because he nodded. Urgent cases are my specialty, he said warmly. Give me 20 minutes to drop these supplies at the church and prepare. The ceremony will be simple but proper. That suit you folks? Perfectly, Caleb said. The church was small and plain, with rough-hewn pews and a simple wooden cross hanging behind the altar. Late morning sunlight streamed through the windows, painting the interior in soft gold. Someone had left wildflowers in a vase near the door, purple lupine and yellow arnica, and their sweet scent filled the air. Isabel stood at the back of the church, Eleanor beside her, watching as Caleb and Sheriff Dawson took their places near the altar. Reverend Matthews had changed into his clerical vestments and stood ready with a worn Bible in his hands. You're doing the right thing, Eleanor whispered, squeezing Isabel's hand. Remember that, no matter what happens next. I barely know him. You know enough. You know he's kind and honorable, and in this world that's more than most women get in a husband. The Reverend cleared his throat gently, a signal that they were ready. Eleanor linked her arm through Isabel's, and together they walked down the short aisle. There was no music, no flowers beyond the vase by the door, no guests filling the pews, just the 5 of them and the dusty Montana sunlight, and a vow that would change everything. Caleb turned as they approached, and for a moment, Isabel saw something in his face. Not love, they didn't know each other well enough for that, but something softer than mere duty. Respect, maybe. Recognition of her courage in taking this step. She came to stand beside him, and he offered his hand. She took it, his calloused palm warm against hers. Reverend Matthews opened his Bible and began. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the sight of God to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. Marriage is not to be entered into lightly, but reverently, deliberately, and in accordance with the purposes for which it was instituted. Isabel listened to the words so familiar and yet so strange in this context. This wasn't how she'd imagined getting married when she was a girl, dreaming of white dresses and celebrations. But those dreams had died along with her mother, buried under 3 years of survival and fear. Caleb Holt, do you take Isabel Grant to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part? Caleb's voice was steady and sure. I do. Isabel Grant, do you take Caleb Holt to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, until death do you part? This was it, the moment that would seal her fate, for good or ill. Isabel looked up at Caleb, at this man who'd found her broken behind his barn and offered her safety without asking for anything in return. She thought about Darius, about the life she was leaving behind, about the uncertain future ahead. I do, she said, and meant it. The rings? Reverend Matthews asked. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple gold band, worn smooth with age. It was my mother's, he said quietly, for Isabel's ears alone. You don't have to wear it if you don't want to, but it's yours if you'll have it. Isabel held out her left hand, trembling slightly. Caleb slid the ring onto her finger with surprising gentleness, and it fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the Reverend said, closing his Bible. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. You may kiss your bride, Mr. Holt. Caleb looked at Isabel, a question in his eyes. She nodded, just barely, and he leaned down and pressed the lightest of kisses to her forehead, chaste, respectful, nothing more. But even that brief contact sent a shock through Isabel's system. When was the last time someone had touched her with tenderness instead of violence? Eleanor was crying happy tears, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Sheriff Dawson was smiling, genuine warmth in his expression. Reverend Matthews beamed at them both. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Holt. May your union be blessed with happiness and peace. They signed the register, making it official in the eyes of both God and law. Isabel's hand was steady as she wrote her new name for the first time, Isabel Holt. It looked strange on the page, foreign, but also like a promise of something better. Outside the church, Sheriff Dawson shook Caleb's hand and tipped his hat to Isabel. Mrs. Holt, welcome to the family of married folks, and don't you worry about your stepfather. If he comes around causing trouble, he'll have to answer to me. A man's got a right to protect his wife, and the law backs that right. Thank you, Sheriff, for everything. Just doing what's right. And Caleb, Dawson's expression grew serious. You take care of her. I know this started as a practical arrangement, but that girl's been through hell. She deserves kindness. She'll get it, Caleb promised. You have my word. They stopped at the Mercantile on the way out of town, where Caleb insisted on buying supplies despite Isabel's protests. You need proper clothes that fit, he said, guiding her through the aisles. And shoes. Can't have my wife walking around barefoot. The word wife still sounded strange, but the shopkeeper's wife, a plump, cheerful woman named Mrs. Henderson, treated Isabel with warm respect, measuring her for 2 new dresses and finding her a pair of sturdy boots that fit reasonably well. Heard you just got married, Mrs. Henderson said, pinning fabric around Isabel's waist. Congratulations, dear. Caleb Holt's a good man. You're lucky to have him. I am, Isabel said, and realized she meant it. As Caleb paid for the purchases, more than Isabel thought necessary, but he waved away her concerns, she noticed a man standing near the window, watching them. He was rough-looking, with a scarred face and mean eyes, and something about the way he stared made Isabel's skin crawl. Caleb, she said quietly, moving closer to him. That man by the window. Do you know him? Caleb glanced over, and his expression hardened. Travis Keene. Works for various ranchers doing odd jobs. Why? He's watching us. Watching me. Probably just curious. The wedding's already all over town, I'd wager. But Caleb moved protectively closer, his hand finding the small of Isabel's back. Come on, let's get home. They were loading the supplies into the wagon when a voice rang out across the street, slurred and angry and sickeningly familiar. Isabel, Isabel, you get over here right now. Isabel froze, every muscle in her body locking up. She turned slowly, already knowing what she'd see. Darius Grant stood outside the saloon, swaying slightly, his face flushed with drink and rage. He looked worse than she remembered, more haggard, more wild-eyed, more dangerous. Behind him, Travis Keene emerged from the mercantile, a satisfied smirk on his scarred face. "I said get over here, girl!" Darius started across the street, stumbling slightly. "You think you can run from me? You think you can steal from me and just disappear?" Caleb stepped in front of Isabel, his body a wall between her and her stepfather. "That's close enough, Grant." Darius stopped, squinting at Caleb. "Who the hell are you?" "Caleb Holt. And that woman you're yelling at is my wife now. You've got no claim on her anymore." For a moment, Darius just stared, his drink-addled brain trying to process the information. Then he laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Your wife? That lying little thief is your wife? Well, ain't that convenient? Probably told you all sorts of stories about me, didn't she? Made herself out to be some kind of victim?" "I've seen the bruises," Caleb said, his voice dangerously quiet. "I've seen what you did to her. That's all the story I need." People were gathering now, drawn by the commotion. Isabel saw faces she recognized from her childhood, people who'd known her mother, people who'd watched her struggle under Darius's thumb and done nothing. They watched now with varying expressions: curiosity, pity, judgment. "She's a liar and a thief," Darius insisted, his voice rising. "She took money and jewels that belonged to her mother, belonged to me. I want them back. And I want her held accountable." Sheriff Dawson appeared from the crowd, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. "Grant, you're drunk and making a scene. Go sleep it off." "I got rights, Sheriff. She stole from me." "She took nothing," Isabel said, finding her voice despite the fear that threatened to choke her. She stepped out from behind Caleb, ignoring his murmured protest. "I left with nothing but my life, which you were about to take from me. You want to talk about theft? You stole 3 years from me. You stole my peace, my safety, my sense of being human. You took my mother's wedding ring off her dead hand and pawned it for whiskey money. Don't you dare stand there and call me a thief." The crowd murmured, and Isabel saw the shift in their expressions. They'd all known her mother. They'd all seen the ring she'd worn with such pride, and they all knew Darius's relationship with the bottle. Darius's face went purple with rage. "You ungrateful little!" He lunged forward, his hand reaching for Isabel. He never made it. Caleb moved faster than Isabel would have thought possible for a man his size, intercepting Darius and grabbing his wrist in a grip that made the older man cry out. "Touch her and you'll lose the hand," Caleb said, his voice low and deadly serious. "She's under my protection now. You want to press charges about stolen property, you go through proper channels. But you come at my wife again, drunk and violent, and I'll put you down like the rabid dog you are." "Caleb's right," Sheriff Dawson added, his hand now openly on his pistol. "You've got a legal complaint, Grant. File it proper. But you threaten Mrs. Holt again, you'll spend the night in a cell. Maybe longer." Darius jerked his hand free, cradling it against his chest. His eyes, when they fixed on Isabel, were full of such hatred that she felt it like a physical blow. "This ain't over," he said. "You think marrying some rancher makes you safe? You think a piece of paper changes anything? You're mine, Isabel. You'll always be mine." "She's not," Caleb said firmly. "She never was. Now get out of here before the sheriff makes good on his promise." Darius spat in the dust at their feet, turned, and staggered back toward the saloon. Travis Keene watched for a moment longer, his eyes calculating, then followed. The crowd began to disperse, the show over, but Isabel could hear their whispers, feel their stares. Some were sympathetic, but others were judgmental, talking about how fast the wedding had happened, speculating about what might have driven it, casting doubt on Isabel's story. Eleanor appeared at Isabel's side, taking her arm. "Pay them no mind, dear. Small-town gossip burns hot but dies fast. Come on, let's get you home." The ride back to the ranch was quiet, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Isabel sat in the back of the wagon again, but this time she didn't watch the landscape. She stared at the gold band on her finger, at the proof that she was married, that she belonged to someone in the eyes of the law. But unlike with Darius, this belonging came with a promise of freedom, not imprisonment. As the ranch house came into view, Isabel felt something in her chest loosen slightly. Home. Caleb had called it that, and now it was hers too, at least for as long as she needed it. Caleb helped her down from the wagon, and for a moment they stood there, suddenly awkward with each other. Married but strangers. Husband and wife, but nothing more. "I'll put the horses up," Caleb said finally. "Eleanor, can you—" "I'll get Isabel settled," Eleanor said. "Come on, Mrs. Holt. Let's get you out of those good clothes and into something comfortable." Mrs. Holt? The name still sounded foreign, but Isabel was starting to think she could get used to it. Inside, Eleanor helped her change back into the simple calico dress, then guided her to the kitchen where she put the kettle on for tea. "You did well today," the housekeeper said, bustling about with cups and honey. "Stood up to him in front of the whole town. That took courage." "It took desperation," Isabel corrected, "and Caleb's protection. Without him there, Darius would have— But Caleb was there. That's the point. You're not alone anymore, Isabel. You've got people on your side now." The tea was hot and sweet, and Isabel wrapped her hands around the cup, drawing comfort from its warmth. Through the window, she could see Caleb in the barn, moving with the easy confidence of a man completely at home in his own space. He'd married her to protect her, bound himself legally to a stranger, disrupted his orderly life for someone he'd known less than a day. "Why is he really doing this, Eleanor?" Isabel asked quietly. "The truth. It can't just be about his sister." Eleanor sat down across from her, her expression thoughtful. "The truth is complex. Yes, Emma's death weighs on him, probably always will. But it's more than that. Caleb spent the last 10 years building this ranch, working himself near to death to make something of nothing. He's been successful at it too, but success without someone to share it with gets lonely. I think part of him saw in you a chance at something more than just protecting someone. A chance at companionship, maybe. Partnership. But we don't know each other." "Not yet, but you will. Marriage is strange that way. Sometimes knowing each other comes after the vows, not before." Eleanor smiled. "My own husband and I married after knowing each other for all of 3 weeks. We had 42 years together before he passed, and every one of them was a gift. Give it time, Isabel. Give both of you time." That night, after a quiet supper where none of them said much, Isabel found herself standing in what was now her room, staring at the bed and wondering what came next. They were married, but Caleb had made it clear it was in name only. So where did that leave them? A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. "Isabel, can I come in?" "Yes." Caleb entered, still dressed but without his boots, his hair damp from washing. He looked tired, she realized, and uncertain in a way he hadn't been before. "I wanted to make sure you understood," he said, staying near the door. "This room is yours. I won't disturb you here. My room's at the other end of the hall. You're safe here, truly safe. Not just from your stepfather, but from any expectations." Isabel felt her throat tighten. "You're a good man, Caleb Holt." "I'm trying to be." Though standing in my wife's bedroom on our wedding night, assuring her I won't touch her, not sure that's how good men usually operate. He smiled slightly, but there was sadness in it. "It's how honorable men operate," Isabel corrected. She moved closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in his hazel eyes, close enough to see the care lines around them. "Thank you. For today. For all of it. For giving me a chance at a life that's mine." "You don't need to thank me." "I do, because you didn't have to help. You could have just let me hide behind your barn until I was strong enough to move on. But you gave me more than shelter. You gave me your name, your protection, your word. That's not a small thing." Caleb looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. "You gave me something too, even if you don't know it yet." "What?" "A reason to believe that doing the right thing still matters. That honor isn't just an old-fashioned word that—" He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "That I can make a difference, even if I couldn't save Emma. So thank you, Isabel, for trusting me enough to say yes." He left then, closing the door quietly behind him, and Isabel was alone with her thoughts and the weight of the gold band on her finger. She lay down in the soft bed, in the clean nightgown, in a room that was hers, in a house where she was safe. For the first time in 3 years, she let herself cry, not from pain or fear, but from relief. She was free. She was married to a man who asked nothing of her but the chance to protect her. She had a future that was uncertain, but no longer terrifying. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Darius wouldn't give up easily. She knew that. The town would gossip. The situation would be complicated. But tonight, for this one night, Isabel let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would be all right. She fell asleep with her hand curled around the ring on her finger, and for once, her dreams were peaceful. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that surprised Isabel with its gentleness. She woke each morning to the sound of Caleb moving quietly through the house, already up and tending to the animals before first light. Eleanor would have breakfast ready by the time Isabel emerged from her room, her ribs still aching but healing, the bruises fading from purple to yellow-green. At first, Isabel felt like an intruder in this established household, unsure of her place or purpose. She was a wife, yes, but not in any traditional sense. She was a guest, but one who'd been given permanent status. She existed in a strange liminal space that left her uncertain how to act, what to do with herself. On the third morning after the wedding, she came into the kitchen to find Eleanor kneading bread dough with strong, practiced hands. The older woman looked up and smiled. "There you are. How are those ribs feeling?" "Better. Still tender, but I can breathe without wanting to cry now." Isabel poured herself coffee from the pot on the stove, savoring the rich smell. Real coffee, not the chicory-stretched brew Darius had rationed out like liquid gold. "Eleanor, can I help? With the cooking, the cleaning, something? I feel useless just sitting around." Eleanor's hand stilled in the dough. "You're recovering, dear. No one expects you to work." "I know, but I need to. I need to feel like I'm contributing, like I'm earning my place here." Isabel set down her cup, her voice earnest. "Please, let me help." The housekeeper studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but you take breaks when you need them, and if those ribs start hurting worse, you stop. Understood?" "Understood." So Isabel learned the rhythms of the ranch household. She helped Eleanor with the cooking, discovering that she had a natural talent for baking that made the older woman beam with approval. She learned to tend the vegetable garden, pulling weeds and watering plants in the cool of early morning. She fed the chickens, collected eggs, and even learned to milk the cow, though her hands cramped at first from the unfamiliar motion. Caleb watched this transformation with quiet approval, though he was careful to maintain the distance he'd promised. He spoke to her at meals, asked after her health, treated her with unfailing courtesy, but he never touched her beyond the occasional steadying hand at her elbow, never entered her room, never did anything that might make her uncomfortable. It was everything Isabel had asked for, everything she needed. So why did she sometimes find herself wishing he'd stay at the dinner table a little longer, talk a little more, look at her the way he sometimes did when he thought she wasn't watching? 2 weeks after the wedding, Isabel was in the barn collecting eggs from the nests the hens had made in the hayloft when she heard horses approaching, multiple horses, moving fast. Her heart seized in her chest, old fear flooding through her veins like ice water. She climbed down the ladder quickly, ignoring the protest from her ribs, and peered out the barn door. 4 riders were approaching the house, and even from a distance she recognized the lead rider's swaying posture. Darius. Isabel ran for the house, her feet flying over the dusty ground. She burst through the kitchen door, startling Eleanor, who was rolling out pie crust. "He's here! Darius is here, with 3 other men." Eleanor's face went hard. "Caleb's out checking the fences in the north pasture. He won't hear if there's trouble." She wiped her hands on her apron and moved to the cabinet where Caleb kept his rifles. "Can you shoot?" "I've never—" "Then stay behind me and don't do anything foolish." Eleanor loaded the rifle with practiced efficiency, her hands steady. "If they try to force their way in, we make noise. Lots of it. The ranch hands are in the bunkhouse. They'll come running." The sound of boots on the porch made them both turn toward the front door. A heavy fist pounded against it, rattling the frame. "Isabel, I know you're in there. Come out here, girl. We need to talk." Eleanor moved to the door but didn't open it. "You're trespassing, Darius Grant. This is private property, and you're not welcome here. I got business with my stepdaughter." "She's not your stepdaughter anymore. She's Mrs. Caleb Holt, and she's under her husband's protection. You want to talk to her? You go through proper legal channels. There was muttering from outside, then a different voice spoke up, smoother and more dangerous. Mrs. Walsh, is it? We're not here to cause trouble. Mr. Grant just wants to have a conversation with the girl. Surely that's reasonable. Isabel recognized that voice. Travis Keene, the man who'd been watching them at the mercantile. She moved closer to Eleanor, her hands clenched into fists. There's nothing to discuss, Isabel called out, her voice shaking slightly but clear. I took nothing from you, Darius. I owe you nothing. Leave us alone. You think you're safe behind that door? Darius's voice was thick with rage and alcohol. You think that paper marriage means anything? I raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head. You beat me. Isabel's voice cracked like a whip. You terrorized me for 3 years. You killed my mother with your cruelty and your fists, even if the fever took her in the end. I don't owe you gratitude. I owe you nothing but contempt. The door shuddered as something heavy slammed against it. Eleanor raised the rifle, her finger on the trigger. One more hit on that door and I start shooting, the housekeeper said loudly. I'm a good shot, gentlemen, and the law's on my side. A woman's got a right to defend her home from trespassers. There was a moment of tense silence, then the sound of horses shifting nervously. Through the window, Isabel could see the other men backing their mounts away slightly, clearly not willing to take a bullet for Darius's vendetta. This isn't over, Darius snarled. You hear me, Isabel? This isn't over. That ring on your finger doesn't make you free. Nothing makes you free of me. We'll see about that. The new voice came from behind the riders, calm and authoritative. Isabel's heart leaped with relief as Caleb rode into view, flanked by 2 ranch hands, all 3 of them armed. Caleb's face was set in hard lines, his eyes cold as winter ice. I believe my wife and my housekeeper told you to leave, Caleb said, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. You're trespassing on my land, threatening my household. That's grounds enough to shoot you where you sit, and the law would back me. Travis Keene moved his horse forward slightly, his scarred face twisted in what might have been a smile. Now, Mr. Holt, no need for threats. We're all civilized men here. Are we? Because civilized men don't ride onto another man's property in a pack, drunk, and looking for trouble. Civilized men don't terrorize women. Caleb's eyes never left Darius. You've got 10 seconds to turn those horses around and ride off my land. After that, I stop being civilized. She stole from me, Darius insisted, though some of the bravado had leaked from his voice. I got rights. You've got nothing. No rights, no claim, no business here. She's my wife, under my protection, and if you ever come near her again, I'll kill you. That's not a threat, Grant. That's a promise. The 2 ranch hands moved their horses forward, flanking Caleb, their rifles clearly visible. The numbers had shifted, and Darius's companions were looking decidedly uncomfortable. Let's go, Grant, one of them said nervously. This isn't worth it. Not worth it? Darius's voice rose to a near shriek. She's nothing to you, Caleb interrupted, his voice like steel. Now get off my land before I put you in the ground next to the coyotes I shot last week. For a moment, Isabel thought Darius might actually try something. His hand moved toward his gun, his face purple with rage. But Travis Keene grabbed his arm, leaning in to whisper something Isabel couldn't hear. Whatever it was, it made Darius hesitate. This isn't finished, Darius said finally, yanking his arm free. You think you've won? You haven't. I'll make sure of it. He wheeled his horse around and spurred it into a gallop, riding hard back toward the road. The other 3 men followed, though Travis Keene paused long enough to touch the brim of his hat in Caleb's direction, a gesture that seemed more threatening than respectful. Caleb watched until they were out of sight, then dismounted and strode toward the house. Eleanor opened the door, lowering the rifle. Everyone all right? Caleb asked, his eyes immediately finding Isabel. She nodded, not trusting her voice. The fear and adrenaline were draining away, leaving her shaky and weak. Isabel. Caleb moved closer, his hands reaching out then stopping, as if he wasn't sure he had the right to touch her. Did he hurt you? Did any of them? No. Eleanor and I stayed inside, but Caleb, he's not going to stop. You saw him. He's obsessed. I know. Caleb's jaw was tight, which is why we're going to take precautions. Pete, Sam, he turned to the ranch hands. I want someone watching the house at all times, day and night. Grant's unpredictable when he's drinking, and I don't trust that Travis Keene as far as I could throw him." "Yes, sir," the younger of the two men said. "We'll set up a rotation." After the ranch hands had left to organize the watch, Caleb finally looked at Isabel properly. Really looked at her, in a way he hadn't since that first day behind the barn. His eyes swept over her face, taking in the fear she was trying to hide, the trembling she couldn't quite control. "Come sit down," he said gently, guiding her to the kitchen table. "Eleanor, can you—" "Already on it." Eleanor was at the stove fixing tea laced with something stronger from the bottle she kept for medicinal purposes. She pressed the cup into Isabel's hands. "Drink. It'll help with the shakes." Isabel drank, the liquid burning pleasantly down her throat, warming her from the inside. Caleb sat across from her, his large hands folded on the table, and she could see the fine tremor in them that betrayed his own fear. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I brought this to your door, this danger, this trouble. Stop. Don't apologize for being a victim of someone else's cruelty." Caleb reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. "I knew what I was taking on when I married you. I knew he wouldn't just disappear. But Isabel, you need to understand something. I meant what I said out there. I will protect you, whatever it takes. He'll kill you if he gets the chance, you and anyone else who gets in his way. Then he better not miss, because I sure as hell won't." Caleb's voice was grim. "I've seen men like your stepfather before. They're bullies who only understand strength. Well, I've got strength, and I've got the law on my side, and I've got men I trust to help. He's one drunk with delusions, and a couple of hired guns who'll scatter the moment things get dangerous." Eleanor set a plate of cookies on the table, fresh baked that morning, still warm. "Caleb's right, dear. Darius Grant is all bluster when he can't terrorize someone weaker than him. Stand up to him, and he collapses like wet paper." "Travis Keene isn't just bluster," Isabel said. "There's something wrong with him, something dangerous." "I know Travis." Caleb's expression darkened. "He's a hired gun, takes jobs from whoever pays, usually claim jumping, intimidation, occasionally worse. If Darius hired him, it means he's serious about causing trouble. But it also means he's getting desperate. Men like Travis don't work cheap." "What do we do?" "We stay alert. We don't take chances. And I ride into town tomorrow and have another talk with Sheriff Dawson. If Darius is hiring men like Travis, the sheriff needs to know." That night, Isabel couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed, listening to the sounds of the house settling, the wind in the eaves, the occasional creak of floorboards as someone moved about. Through her window, she could see the silhouette of Pete, one of the ranch hands, keeping watch from the porch. Around midnight, she heard footsteps in the hallway, then a soft knock on her door. "Isabel, you awake?" Caleb's voice, quiet and concerned. "Yes," she called back. "Can I come in? Just for a moment." She pulled on her robe and opened the door. Caleb stood there in his shirt sleeves, his hair tousled from running his hands through it, his eyes tired. "I saw your light was still on," he said. "Figured you might not be sleeping well after today. I keep hearing things. Every noise sounds like horses, like him coming back." Caleb nodded, understanding. "I could sit outside your door, if it would help. Not in the room, just in the hallway. So you'd know someone was there." Isabel looked at him, this man who'd given her his name and his protection and never asked for anything in return, who treated her with such careful respect that sometimes it hurt, because she was starting to realize she wanted more than respect. She wanted the right to reach out to him, to be comforted by him, to stop living in this careful bubble of separation. "You could come in," she heard herself say. "Sit in the chair by the window. We could talk, maybe. Until I'm tired enough to sleep." Caleb hesitated. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel—" "I'm sure. Please, Caleb, I don't want to be alone right now." He came in, moving to the chair by the window, settling into it with obvious care not to make her uncomfortable. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Isabel sat on the edge of the bed, her hands twisted in her lap, suddenly unsure what to say now that he was here. "Tell me about your sister," she said finally. "Emma. You've mentioned her, but I don't really know the story." Caleb was quiet for so long that Isabel thought he might not answer, But then he began to speak, his voice low and distant with memory. Emma was 3 years younger than me. Prettiest girl in 3 counties, smart as a whip, could ride better than most men I knew. Our parents died when I was 18 and she was 15. Fever took them both within a week of each other. We were alone after that, just the two of us against the world. He paused, his eyes fixed on something only he could see. I tried to take care of her, worked myself near to death to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. When Daniel Miller started courting her, I was relieved at first. He came from a good family, had prospects, seemed decent. Emma fell hard for him, and I thought it would be good for her to have someone besides her brother to lean on. But he wasn't decent. No, he wasn't. He was careful about it at first. Nothing obvious, nothing I could point to and say that's wrong. But Emma started changing, getting quieter, more nervous, wearing long sleeves even in summer, making excuses for why she couldn't visit as often. Isabel's heart ached, recognizing the pattern so clearly. I tried to talk to her, Caleb continued, his voice rough. Tried to get her to tell me what was happening, but she'd just smile and say everything was fine, that I was worrying over nothing, and I let myself believe it because it was easier than confronting the truth. It wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? I knew something was wrong, I felt it in my gut, but I didn't push hard enough, didn't act fast enough. And then one day, Sheriff Dawson came to tell me there'd been an accident. Emma had fallen down the stairs, broken her neck, dead before the doctor could get there. Isabel moved from the bed to kneel beside his chair, driven by instinct and empathy. Caleb, you can't blame yourself for what someone else did. Can I? Because I do, every day. I look in the mirror and see the man who let his sister die because he was too polite, too respectful of boundaries, too willing to believe lies. Caleb's eyes, when they met hers, were haunted. That's why I couldn't let you run. Why I had to help, even if it meant marrying a stranger. Because maybe if I could save you, it would mean Emma's death wasn't completely meaningless, that I learned something from it. You did save me. You are saving me. Every day I wake up safe in this house. Am I? Because Darius is still out there, still threatening you. Travis Keene is on his payroll, and I'm sitting here telling you about my failures while you comfort me, when it should be the other way around. Isabel reached out, hesitated, then placed her hand over his where it rested on the arm of the chair. It was the first time she'd initiated touch between them, and she felt him go still at the contact. You're not failing, she said firmly. You gave me a choice when I had none. You gave me safety when I was running on bleeding feet. You gave me your name and asked nothing in return. That's not failure, Caleb. That's grace. He turned his hand over, his palm meeting hers, his fingers curling gently around hers. I don't feel very graceful. Mostly I feel angry that men like your stepfather and my former brother-in-law exist, and scared that I won't be enough to protect you. You're enough. More than enough. Isabel squeezed his hand. And I'm not Emma. I'm not going to hide what's happening or pretend everything's fine. I'm going to fight, Caleb, alongside you, not just behind you. Something shifted in his expression, a warmth creeping into those hazel eyes. You're stronger than you know, Isabel Holt. I'm learning to be. You're teaching me, whether you realize it or not. They sat like that for a while, hands clasped, something unspoken building between them. It wasn't love. Not yet. They hardly knew each other. But it was the foundation of something that might become love, given time and care. Eventually, Caleb stood, reluctantly releasing her hand. You should try to sleep. I'll be right down the hall if you need anything, and Pete's on the porch. You're safe, I promise. Caleb? Isabel caught his sleeve as he turned to go. Thank you for telling me about Emma, for trusting me with that. Thank you for listening, and for not judging me for my failures. They're not failures, they're wounds that made you who you are, someone worth trusting. After he left, Isabel climbed back into bed and found that sleep came easier than expected. The house felt less empty knowing Caleb was just down the hall, that they'd crossed some invisible line tonight from strangers bound by circumstance to something approaching genuine connection. The next morning brought unexpected visitors of a different sort. Isabel was in the garden, weeding the vegetables, when Eleanor called from the house. Isabel, someone's here to see you. Isabel straightened, her hand going instinctively to the small knife she'd started carrying in her apron pocket, one of Caleb's suggestions after yesterday's incident. But when she rounded the house, she saw a wagon pulled by two horses, and sitting in the driver's seat was a woman near her own age, with familiar warm brown eyes. "Sarah?" Isabel breathed, hardly believing it. Sarah Morrison, Sarah Fletcher now, Eleanor had mentioned, had been Isabel's closest friend before Darius had isolated her from everyone she knew. They'd grown up together, gone to the same small schoolhouse, shared secrets and dreams. Then Isabel's mother had married Darius, and slowly, systematically, he'd cut Isabel off from everyone who might have helped her. "Isabel!" Sarah scrambled down from the wagon and ran to her, pulling her into a fierce hug that made Isabel's ribs protest, but that she wouldn't have stopped for the world. "Oh God, I heard you'd married Caleb Holt, but I had to see for myself. Are you all right? Are you safe?" "I'm safe," Isabel managed, tears streaming down her face. "Sarah, I'm so sorry I disappeared. I wanted to write, to visit, but he wouldn't. I know. We all knew something was wrong, but your stepfather kept everyone away. Said you were sick or busy or didn't want visitors. Mrs. Fletcher tried to call on you a few times, but he always had excuses." Sarah pulled back, her hands gripping Isabel's shoulders, her eyes searching. "But you got away. You married Caleb Holt, and you got away." "I did, though it's complicated." "Complicated how?" "Oh, Isabel, tell me he's treating you well. Tell me you didn't escape one bad situation just to land in another." "No, nothing like that. Caleb is—" Isabel paused, trying to find the right words. "He's kind. He's honorable. He married me to protect me from Darius, nothing more. We're married in name only." Sarah's eyebrows rose. "In name only? But you're living here, as his wife. In a separate room with no expectations. It's an arrangement, Sarah. Legal protection. And you're all right with that?" Isabel thought about the previous night, about sitting with Caleb in her room, their hands clasped, something tender growing between them. "I'm all right with it, for now. It's what I need." Sarah studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Well, arrangement or not, I'm just glad you're safe. The whole town's been talking about the wedding and about what happened yesterday when Darius rode out here with those men. People are choosing sides, Isabel. Most of them are on yours for what it's worth." "Most?" "There are always a few who think a woman should submit to male authority, no matter what. And Darius has been spreading lies, saying you're mentally unwell, that the marriage isn't legitimate. But Sheriff Dawson shut that talk down fast. Told everyone in the saloon that you're legally Mrs. Holt and under your husband's protection, and anyone who had a problem with it could take it up with him." Isabel felt a rush of gratitude for the sheriff's support. "I should write him a thank you note." "You should. But Isabel, I came here for more than just gossip. I came to warn you." Sarah glanced toward the house, then lowered her voice. "Darius is planning something. My husband Tom heard him talking in the saloon last night, drunk and raving. He's convinced that if he can prove the marriage isn't legitimate somehow, he can get you declared his property again." "That's insane. The marriage is completely legal. I know that. You know that. But Darius doesn't operate on logic when he's drinking, and Travis Keene was encouraging him, talking about how there are ways to handle situations like this. Tom said it sounded like a threat." Ice slithered down Isabel's spine. "What kind of threat?" "We don't know. But Tom wanted me to tell you to be careful, to stay close to the ranch, to not take any chances. Travis Keene is dangerous, Isabel. He's been in trouble with the law in 3 different territories. If Darius has him on his payroll, it means he's serious about whatever he's planning." Eleanor appeared on the porch, followed by Caleb, who must have heard voices and come to investigate. His eyes went immediately to Isabel, checking that she was all right, before moving to Sarah with polite curiosity. "Everything okay out here?" he asked. "Caleb, this is my friend Sarah Fletcher. Sarah, my husband, Caleb Holt." Sarah curtsied slightly, an old-fashioned gesture that made Isabel smile despite the tension. "Mr. Holt, I've heard good things about you." "Mrs. Fletcher." Caleb nodded, his eyes sharp. "You brought news, I'm guessing, about Darius Grant?" "Tom sent me. He heard Grant in the saloon last night making threats. We thought you should know." "Come inside, Caleb said. "Tell us everything." They gathered in the kitchen, Eleanor making tea while Sarah recounted everything Tom had heard in the saloon. Caleb listened intently, his expression growing darker with each detail. "He's escalating," Caleb said when Sarah finished. "Getting more desperate. That makes him more dangerous." "What will you do?" Sarah asked. "Same as I've been doing. Protect my wife, keep watch, and make sure Grant knows that any move he makes against us will be met with force." Caleb looked at Isabel. "We need to be more careful. No going anywhere alone, not even to the barn or the garden. One of the ranch hands needs to be in sight at all times." "I can't live like a prisoner," Isabel protested. "I'm not asking you to be a prisoner. I'm asking you to be smart. Grant's shown he's willing to come here with armed men. Next time, he might not bother announcing himself." Caleb's voice softened. "Please, Isabel, I can't protect you if you're not willing to take precautions." Isabel wanted to argue, to insist on her independence, but the fear in Sarah's eyes, the genuine concern in Caleb's voice, made her nod reluctantly. "All right, I'll be careful." Sarah stayed for lunch, filling Isabel in on all the town gossip. Who'd married, who'd had babies, who'd moved away. It was a gift, this connection to her old life, and Isabel treasured every moment of it. When Sarah finally left, with promises to visit again soon, Isabel felt both lighter and heavier at the same time. That evening, as she helped Eleanor prepare supper, Caleb came in from checking the perimeter. He looked tired, Isabel thought, the lines around his eyes deeper than usual. "Everything secure?" Eleanor asked. "For now, but I'm increasing the watch. 2 men at all times instead of 1, rotating every 4 hours instead of 8. I don't want anyone getting too tired to pay attention." "That's a lot of manpower," Eleanor observed, "and it can't go on forever." "It won't have to. Something's going to break soon. Either Grant will make his move or he'll give up and move on. Men like him don't have the patience for a long siege." "And if he makes his move?" Isabel asked quietly. Caleb met her eyes steadily. "Then we'll be ready." But as Isabel lay in bed that night, listening to the sounds of the ranch, she couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was coming would be worse than any of them anticipated. Darius had the look of a man with nothing left to lose, and those were always the most dangerous kind. She fingered the gold band on her finger, drawing comfort from its solid presence. She was Mrs. Caleb Holt now, protected by law and by a man who'd proven his honor time and again. Whatever storm was coming, she wouldn't face it alone. That thought, more than anything, allowed her finally to sleep. 3 weeks passed in uneasy quiet, the ranch settling into a state of vigilant normalcy that wore on everyone's nerves. The doubled watch continued, the ranch hands taking shifts that left them tired but alert. Caleb barely slept, Isabel could tell, often finding him on the porch in the early morning hours, coffee cup in hand, eyes scanning the horizon for threats that never materialized. The waiting was almost worse than action would have been. Isabel threw herself into ranch work with a determination that surprised even Eleanor. Her ribs had healed enough that she could move without pain, and she'd discovered that keeping busy helped quiet the constant anxiety that whispered at the edges of her mind. She learned to churn butter, to preserve vegetables for winter, to mend clothes with neat, even stitches. She even started helping with the horses, drawn to their gentle strength. It was while working with the horses that things began to shift between her and Caleb in ways neither of them had quite expected. She was in the barn one afternoon, brushing down Caleb's mare, a beautiful chestnut named Copper, when he came in from checking the fence line. He stopped in the doorway, and she felt his eyes on her before she turned to look. "She likes you," Caleb said, moving closer. "Copper doesn't take to most people. She's particular." "I like her too. She's got spirit, but she's not mean about it." Isabel ran the brush along the mare's glossy neck, feeling the powerful muscles beneath. "My mother loved horses. Before she married Darius, she used to ride all the time. She tried to teach me, but after the wedding, he sold her mare, said it was frivolous for a woman to ride." Caleb's jaw tightened at the mention of Darius, as it always did. "Would you like to learn? To ride properly, I mean. We've got a gentle gelding that would suit you." "I'd like that." Isabel set down the brush and turned to face him fully. "Caleb, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why don't you ever talk about yourself? I know about Emma, about losing your parents, but not much else. What do you want, beyond running this ranch? What do you dream about?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He leaned against the stall door, his hat pushed back on his head, considering his answer carefully. I don't think much about dreams anymore, he said finally. Dreams are for young men with time to spare. I'm 32, Isabel. I've spent the last 10 years building this ranch from nothing, proving I could make something of myself. That was the dream, I suppose, and I've done it. But what about after? What happens when the ranch is established and you've proven whatever you needed to prove? I don't know. The admission seemed to cost him something. I hadn't thought much past survival and success. Figured I'd grow old here, maybe take on a partner eventually to help run things. It seemed like enough. Seemed like? Before. He looked at her intently. Before you showed up behind my barn, bleeding and desperate and trusting me with your life. Now everything feels different, like I've been living half asleep and someone finally shook me awake. Isabel's breath caught. They'd been so careful around each other, so respectful of boundaries. But there was something in Caleb's eyes now, something raw and honest that made her heart race. Caleb. Thunder cracked overhead, sudden and violent, making them both jump. Through the barn door, Isabel could see dark clouds rolling in fast, the kind of storm that came out of nowhere in the Montana Territory and turned the world sideways. We need to get the animals secured, Caleb said, all business again, though his eyes lingered on her face for a moment longer. This looks like it's going to be bad. They worked together as the storm broke, closing shutters and reinforcing doors against wind that screamed like something alive. Rain came down in sheets so thick Isabel could barely see across the yard. Lightning turned the world white and stark, followed by thunder that shook the house to its foundations. By the time they made it back inside, they were both soaked through, water streaming from their clothes and puddling on Eleanor's clean floor. The housekeeper took one look at them and pointed toward the kitchen. Both of you, out of those wet things before you catch your death. Isabel, I'll fetch you a robe. Caleb, you know where your dry clothes are. Go. Isabel changed in her room, her fingers clumsy on the buttons, her skin raised in goosebumps from the cold rain. When she emerged in her thick robe, her hair hanging in damp tangles down her back, she found Caleb in the kitchen wearing dry clothes and toweling his hair dry. He looked younger somehow without his hat, more approachable, and Isabel felt something warm unfurl in her chest at the domestic intimacy of the moment. Eleanor had hot coffee waiting, laced with honey and a splash of whiskey. They sat at the kitchen table, warming their hands on the cups, listening to the storm rage outside. The ranch hands would be hunkered down in the bunkhouse, safe and dry. For this moment, it was just the three of them in the warm kitchen, the rest of the world held at bay by wind and rain. Storm like this, it'll wash out the roads, Eleanor observed. No one's going anywhere tonight, not even if they wanted to. The implications hung in the air. Darius couldn't reach them, couldn't threaten them, not through this deluge. For tonight at least, they were completely safe. I'll make stew, Eleanor announced, rising from the table. Something hot and filling. You two sit and dry out properly. Left alone with Caleb, Isabel found herself acutely aware of his presence across the small table. His hair was still damp, curling slightly at the ends. His shirt clung to his shoulders where he hadn't dried completely. He was looking at her the way he sometimes did when he thought she wasn't paying attention, with a mixture of protectiveness and something deeper, something that made her skin flush with more than just the warmth from the coffee. What you said in the barn, Isabel began, her voice soft enough that Eleanor wouldn't hear over the storm, about feeling half asleep before I came. I feel that way too. Like I've been living in a dream, a nightmare really, and now I'm finally waking up to what life could be. Isabel. Her name was rough in his throat. We agreed. Protection, nothing more. I don't want you to feel obligated. I don't feel obligated. I feel grateful and safe and... She hesitated, gathering courage, and like maybe we've been so busy keeping our distance that we're missing something that could be good. Really good. Caleb set down his coffee cup with careful precision. You don't know what you're saying. A month ago, you were running for your life. You're grateful, and you're confusing that with... Don't tell me what I'm feeling, Isabel interrupted, more sharply than she'd intended. I've had too many people in my life telling me what I think, what I want, what I should be grateful for. I know my own mind, Caleb Holt. And what I know is that somewhere in the last few weeks, this stopped being just an arrangement for me. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the howl of wind and the drumming of rain. Caleb's hands were clenched into fists on the table, his knuckles white with tension. It stopped being just an arrangement for me too, he admitted finally. About 2 days after I married you, if I'm being honest. But I made you a promise, Isabel. I promised you safety without expectations, and I won't break that promise just because I've developed feelings I shouldn't have. What if I want you to? What if I'm asking you to? You don't know what you're asking. Yes, I do. Isabel reached across the table, covering one of his clenched fists with her hand. I'm asking if we can try being married for real. Not just on paper, but in truth. I'm asking if you feel what I feel when we're in the same room, this pull, this connection. I'm asking if maybe we could stop being so careful with each other and see what happens when we're not. Caleb turned his hand over, his fingers threading through hers, his grip almost desperate. I'm afraid, he said, the words seeming dragged out of him. I'm afraid of pushing you too fast, of making you feel trapped, of becoming another man who takes without asking. I'm afraid that what I feel is so strong it'll scare you, and you'll run, and I'll lose the one good thing that's happened to me in 10 years. I'm not running. I'm right here, and I'm choosing this, choosing you. Isabel squeezed his hand. We don't have to change everything overnight. We can go slowly. But Caleb, I need you to know, I want to try. I want to see if this arrangement can become something real. He stood abruptly, pulling her up with him, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her properly, not the chaste peck on the forehead from their wedding day, but something real and honest. Instead, he pulled her into an embrace, his arms coming around her carefully, as if she might break. Isabel melted into him, her head against his chest, where she could hear his heart hammering. His chin rested on top of her head, and she felt him let out a shaky breath. We'll go slow, he murmured into her hair. We'll take time. But Isabel, I need you to know, if we do this, if we make this real, I'm all in. I don't do things halfway. When I commit completely. I wouldn't want it any other way. They stood like that, wrapped in each other's arms, while the storm raged outside, until Eleanor's pointed throat clearing made them step apart. The housekeeper was smiling knowingly as she stirred her stew, not even pretending she hadn't been aware of every word. About time you two figured that out, she said cheerfully. I was starting to think I'd have to lock you in a room together. Isabel felt her cheeks burn, but Caleb laughed, a sound she'd rarely heard from him, warm and genuine. Eleanor Walsh, you're a meddling old woman. Someone has to be. You young people take forever to sort out your feelings. Eleanor tasted the stew and nodded in satisfaction. Now, this'll be ready in about 20 minutes. In the meantime, Caleb, why don't you teach Isabel to play chess? I know you've been wanting to. I've seen you looking at that board on the shelf. Would you like that? Caleb asked Isabel. Fair warning, I'm a terrible teacher, too impatient. I'd like to try. They set up the chessboard on the kitchen table while Eleanor puttered about with her cooking. Caleb explained the pieces and their movements with surprising patience, correcting Isabel's mistakes gently, praising her when she made a smart move. The domesticity of it all, the warm kitchen, the cooking smells, the simple game, the man across from her whose eyes kept catching hers with new awareness, made Isabel's throat tight with emotion. This was what she'd never had with Darius, never had with her mother after the wedding. This simple, profound normalcy. The ability to exist without fear, to laugh without looking over her shoulder, to look forward to tomorrow instead of dreading it. Check, Caleb said, moving his bishop. Then more softly, Are you all right? You look like you're about to cry. I'm happy, Isabel said, wiping at her eyes. I'm just happy, and I'm not used to it. His hand found hers across the chessboard, his thumb stroking over her knuckles. Get used to it. I plan on making you happy for a long time. The storm continued through dinner and into the evening, showing no signs of letting up. They ate Eleanor's stew by lamplight, talking about small things, the garden, the horses, the book Caleb was reading about modern ranching techniques. Easy conversation that felt like slipping into warm water, comfortable and right. After dinner, Eleanor excused herself to bed, leaving them alone in the parlor. Caleb built up the fire while Isabel settled on the sofa, curling her feet under her. The storm had cooled the evening air, making the fire's warmth welcome. "Tell me something about you I don't know," Caleb said, taking a seat beside her, closer than he would have sat before their conversation in the kitchen. "Something from before. Before Darius, before everything went wrong." Isabel thought for a moment, reaching back through memories that felt faded and distant. "When I was 10, I wanted to be a teacher. My mother had taught me to read and write, and I loved it. The way words could transport you somewhere else, could make you feel things, could explain the world. I used to line up my dolls and teach them lessons, pretend I had a whole classroom full of students. What happened to that dream? What happens to most dreams, I suppose? Reality. My father died when I was 12, and my mother started taking in sewing to make ends meet. I helped her learn to sew instead of learning to teach. Then she met Darius, and he seemed like the answer to all our problems. A man with means, willing to take care of us." Isabel's voice went flat. "She was dead within 2 years, and my dream of teaching died with her. It doesn't have to stay dead." Caleb shifted to face her more fully. "There are children in Copper Ridge who need teaching. The schoolhouse is there, but they're always looking for teachers. Once things settle down with Darius, once it's safe, you could do it, if you wanted." "You'd support that? Your wife working outside the home?" "Your dreams are your own, Isabel. I'd never stand in the way of them." He smiled slightly. "Though I admit I'd miss having you around the ranch all day. I've gotten used to looking up and seeing you in the garden or the barn. I've gotten used to being there. Gotten used to this life." She reached out, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingertips, feeling the rasp of stubble under her touch. "Gotten used to you." Caleb caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent heat racing up her arm. "Isabel, if we're going to take this slow like I promised, you can't look at me like that." "Like what?" "Like you trust me completely. Like I'm something precious. Like—" He stopped, his voice going rough. "Like you might be falling in love with me." "Would that be so terrible?" "No. It would be terrifying and wonderful, and I'm not sure I deserve it, but terrible. Never." He kept her hand pressed against his chest, right over his heart where she could feel it pounding. "I'm falling too, Isabel. Have been since the moment you took my hand behind the barn and trusted me to help you. But I want to do this right. I want you to be sure." "I am sure." "You can't be. Not yet. It's too soon. You've been through too much. Give it time. Give us time." Caleb's eyes were earnest, almost pleading. "I want you to choose me not because I saved you, but because you genuinely want me, for myself, not for what I represent." Isabel understood what he was asking, even as part of her wanted to protest that she already knew her own heart. But maybe he was right. Maybe they both needed time to figure out where gratitude ended and something deeper began. "All right," she agreed. "We'll take time. But Caleb, I'm already choosing you. Every day, I'm choosing you." They sat together as the fire burned low, hands clasped, shoulders touching, while the storm gradually spent itself outside. At some point, Isabel's head drifted to Caleb's shoulder, and his arm came around her, holding her gently. She felt safe in a way that went beyond physical protection, safe to be herself, to want things, to imagine a future that didn't involve fear and pain. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, Caleb was carefully lifting her, carrying her toward her room. She stirred in his arms, blinking up at him in the dim hallway. "Shh, it's all right. Just getting you to bed." His voice was a low rumble in his chest. "You fell asleep on the sofa." He set her down gently on her bed, pulling the quilt up over her. In the moonlight streaming through the window, the storm had finally passed. She could see his face clearly, the tenderness in his expression as he looked down at her. "Good night, Isabel." "Stay," she whispered, catching his hand. Not like that. Just stay until I fall asleep, please." After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. He pulled the chair from her desk over to the bedside and sat, his hand still clasped in hers. "I'm here. Sleep now." Isabel drifted off with her hand in Caleb's, feeling safer than she'd ever felt in her life. She didn't know how long he stayed, whether he sat there all night or slipped away after she fell deeply asleep, but when she woke in the morning, she was alone, with just the memory of his presence, and the chair pulled close to her bed as evidence that it hadn't been a dream. The morning after the storm dawned clear and bright, the world washed clean. Isabel woke with a sense of anticipation she couldn't quite name, a feeling that something had shifted permanently between her and Caleb, that crossing the invisible line they'd maintained was both terrifying and inevitable. She dressed and made her way to the kitchen, where Eleanor was already making breakfast. The older woman took one look at Isabel's face and smiled. "Good morning, Mrs. Holt. You look well rested." "I am. Where's Caleb?" "Rode out early with Pete to check the storm damage. The north fence took a beating," he said. "They'll be back by midday." Eleanor cracked eggs into a pan, the sizzle filling the kitchen. "Sit down, dear. We should talk." Isabel sat, suddenly nervous. "About what?" "About what's happening between you and Caleb." Eleanor's tone was gentle but firm. "I've watched you both dancing around each other for weeks now, and last night something changed. I'm glad for it. Don't mistake me. But Isabel, I need to know you're doing this for the right reasons." "I love him." The words came out before Isabel had consciously decided to say them, but once spoken, she knew they were true. "Or I'm falling in love with him. I'm not sure where the line is, but Eleanor, this isn't gratitude or obligation. When I'm with him, I feel like I'm home." Eleanor nodded slowly, sliding eggs onto a plate and setting it in front of Isabel. "Good. Because that boy loves you too, though he's too noble to say it yet. He's terrified of pushing you, of becoming another man who takes advantage. So you need to be patient with him and clear about what you want." "I'm trying to be." "I know. And I see the way he looks at you when you're not watching, like you're something miraculous that walked into his life. But Isabel, there's something else you need to understand. When Caleb loves, he loves absolutely. There's no halfway with him. If you commit to this, to making your marriage real, he'll give you everything he has. His heart, his loyalty, his whole self. Don't accept that unless you're ready to give the same in return." "I am ready. I want to give him everything. Even knowing that Darius is still out there, that this situation with your stepfather isn't resolved, because loving Caleb means living with the danger that comes from protecting you. It means accepting that he'll put himself between you and harm, every single time, without hesitation." Isabel felt cold suddenly, despite the warm kitchen. She hadn't thought about it in those terms, about what her presence in Caleb's life might cost him. "He could get hurt because of me." "He could, and he'd do it gladly, because that's who he is. The question is, can you live with that? Can you let him protect you without trying to protect him from the consequences?" It was a harder question than Isabel wanted to admit. The thought of Caleb being hurt or worse because of her made her stomach churn with nausea. But trying to leave now, trying to protect him by disappearing, would hurt him in different ways. And it would mean giving up on the first real happiness she'd felt in years. "I can live with it," Isabel said finally, "because the alternative, leaving him, pushing him away, would hurt us both worse, and because he needs someone to protect too. After Emma, after spending years blaming himself for not doing enough, he needs to know he can make a difference." "Smart girl." Eleanor patted her hand. "Just remember, love isn't just about the romantic moments. It's about choosing each other every day, especially on the hard days. It's about being honest even when honesty is difficult. And it's about trusting that the other person loves you enough to handle the truth." They ate breakfast together, talking about mundane things, the garden, the preserves that needed making, the upcoming church social that Eleanor thought they should attend. But Isabel's mind kept wandering to Caleb, wondering what he was doing, whether he was thinking about her too, whether he'd lain awake last night the way she had, replaying their conversation and the promises implicit in it. When he finally rode back into the yard around noon, Isabel was in the garden, but she looked up immediately, as if drawn by some invisible thread. He dismounted, said something to Pete, then turned and saw her standing there among the tomato plants. The smile that spread across his face was pure and unguarded, transforming his usually serious expression into something younger, lighter. He walked toward her and she moved to meet him halfway, both of them stopping just short of touching. There was dirt on his hands and dust on his clothes, and he looked tired, but his eyes were warm as they met hers. "Morning," he said, his voice rough from disuse or maybe from something else. "Good morning. How's the fence?" "Repairable. We'll have it fixed by tomorrow." He reached out, then stopped, his hand hanging in the air between them. "Isabel, about last night, don't." She closed the distance, taking his hand despite the dirt. "Don't apologize or take it back. Please." "I wasn't going to. I was going to say that I meant every word, and that I've been thinking all morning about what happens next, how we move forward." "And what did you decide?" "That we start over, properly." He squeezed her hand gently. "Isabel Holt, would you allow me to court you?" The formality of the request made her want to laugh and cry at the same time. "We're already married." "I know, but we skipped all the steps that usually come before marriage. I want to give you those things: courting, romance, the chance to fall in love slowly instead of being thrown together by circumstance. Will you let me?" "Yes," Isabel said, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I'd like that very much." "Good. Then I should probably start by doing this properly." Caleb lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, formal and old-fashioned. "Mrs. Holt, would you do me the honor of joining me for a ride this afternoon? I'd like to show you the eastern pasture. It's beautiful this time of year." "I'd love to, Mr. Holt." They were both smiling now, the awkwardness of the past weeks dissolving into something warmer and more hopeful. This was what they both needed, a chance to choose each other deliberately, to build something real from the foundation of their hasty marriage. But even as Isabel felt her heart expanding with possibility, a part of her couldn't help but remember what Eleanor had said. Darius was still out there. Travis Keene was still on his payroll. And the storm that had kept them safe for one night was over, leaving the roads clear and the ranch accessible once more. The peace they'd found was fragile, and somewhere in the back of her mind, Isabel knew that it couldn't last forever. The afternoon ride through the eastern pasture was everything Caleb had promised, and more. Isabel sat astride the gentle gelding named Smoke, her posture growing more confident with each passing minute as Caleb coached her through the basics of riding. The Montana landscape stretched around them in endless waves of gold and green, the sky so blue it hurt to look at directly, and for a few hours Isabel allowed herself to forget about Darius and danger and everything except the feeling of freedom that came from being on horseback with the wind in her face. "You're a natural," Caleb said, riding beside her on Copper. "Your mother would be proud." "I wish she could have seen this, seen me happy." Isabel's voice caught. "She died thinking I'd be trapped forever with him." "She'd want you to live, Isabel, to be happy. That's what mothers want for their children." Caleb guided Copper closer until their legs almost touched. "And you are happy, aren't you? At least sometimes?" "More than sometimes, especially right now, with you." She looked at him directly, letting him see the truth in her eyes. "You make me happy, Caleb. Not just safe, but genuinely happy." The smile he gave her was worth everything, every moment of fear, every risk she'd taken. They rode in companionable silence for a while longer before heading back as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. But the peace shattered the moment they crested the rise that overlooked the ranch house. Smoke from the chimney rose in the usual lazy spiral, but there was something else. Horses tied to the porch railing, too many of them, and figures moving around the yard with purposeful menace. Caleb went rigid beside her, his hand going immediately to his gun. "Stay behind me. Whatever happens, stay behind me." "Caleb, what?" "It's them. Darius and his men. They're at the house." Terror seized Isabel's chest, making it hard to breathe. "Eleanor, oh God, Eleanor's in there alone. Pete and Sam should be there too. They wouldn't leave her unprotected." But Caleb's voice was tight with worry as he spurred Copper forward, Isabel following on Smoke, her heart hammering against her ribs. As they drew closer, the scene became clearer and more frightening. 5 men stood in the yard, all armed. Darius was among them, swaying slightly, clearly drunk even from this distance. Travis Keene was there too, his scarred face split in a grin that made Isabel's blood run cold. And 3 other men she didn't recognize, hired guns by the look of them, hard-faced and dangerous. Pete lay on the ground near the porch, blood trickling from his head. Sam was on his knees, hands raised, a gun pointed at his back. And Eleanor stood in the doorway, her face pale but defiant, her own rifle trained on Darius, even as two guns were pointed at her. "Caleb Holt," Darius's voice rang out, slurred but triumphant. "Finally decided to come home, did you? And brought my property with you." Caleb dismounted smoothly, his movements deliberate and controlled. He positioned himself between Isabel and the men, his hand resting on his gun but not drawing yet. "You're trespassing, Grant, and you've assaulted my ranch hands. That's a hanging offense in these parts." "Is it now?" Travis Keene stepped forward, his hand hovering near his own weapon. "Seems to me we're just here to collect what belongs to Mr. Grant. That girl there, she's his stepdaughter. She stole from him. We're here to take her back to face justice. She's my wife, not his stepdaughter. She has no legal obligation to him whatsoever." Caleb's voice was steel-wrapped in velvet, dangerous in its calmness. "And she took nothing. Those are lies meant to justify kidnapping and assault." "The marriage isn't legitimate," Darius insisted, taking a stumbling step forward. "She was coerced. She's mentally unwell. The law will see it my way once we explain. The law is Sheriff Dawson, and he was a witness at our wedding. He'll back up everything I'm saying." Caleb's eyes never left Travis Keene, recognizing him as the real threat. "You've got two choices here, Grant. You can ride away now, while you still can, or you can force this situation and discover just how expensive hired guns are when they realize the job isn't worth dying for." One of the hired guns shifted nervously, his eyes darting between Travis and the rifle Eleanor still had trained on them. But Travis just laughed, a sound like gravel in a tin can. "Big words from one man against five. Though I suppose the old woman and the girl might put up a fight too. Could be entertaining." His hand moved fractionally closer to his gun. "Here's what's going to happen, Holt. The girl's going to come with us, nice and peaceful. You're going to let her, because if you don't, your housekeeper and your ranch hands are going to die right here in your yard. Then you'll die. Then we'll take the girl anyway. So really, you're just choosing how many bodies get buried today." Isabel felt the terror threatening to overwhelm her, but beneath it was something else, a fury so intense it burned away the fear. She'd run once. She'd hidden. She'd let herself be a victim for 3 long years, but she was done being afraid, done letting men like Darius and Travis Keene dictate her life. She dismounted before Caleb could stop her, stepping out from behind him despite his sharp intake of breath. "Isabel, no! I'm done hiding behind you, Caleb." She kept her voice steady, though her hands were shaking. "Darius, you want me? You want to drag me back to that house, back to your fists and your cruelty? Then come get me yourself. No hired guns, no backup. Just you and me, right here, right now." "Isabel, what are you doing?" Caleb hissed, but she ignored him, her eyes locked on her stepfather. Darius's face went purple with rage. "You think you're brave now? You think having a husband makes you strong? You're nothing. You've always been nothing. If I'm nothing, then why have you spent weeks trying to get me back? Why hire men and make threats and risk everything?" Isabel's voice rang clear across the yard. "I'll tell you why. Because I'm the only person who knows the truth about you. I know you killed my mother as surely as if you'd put a gun to her head. I know about the bruises she hid, the time she couldn't get out of bed because you'd kicked her so hard. I know everything, and as long as I'm alive and free, I'm a witness to what you really are." "You lying little—" Darius lunged forward, but Travis caught his arm. "Not yet," the gunman said quietly. "Let's think this through." But Darius wasn't thinking. He was beyond thought, beyond reason, lost in rage and whiskey and the absolute conviction that Isabel belonged to him. He shook off Travis's grip and reached for his gun, his movements clumsy but determined. Everything happened at once. Eleanor fired her rifle, the shot going wide but close enough to make one of the hired guns dive for cover. Sam threw himself backward, knocking over the man guarding him. Caleb drew his pistol with practiced speed, his aim steady on Travis Keene, and Isabel, acting on instinct and fury, grabbed the heavy branch that lay near her feet, a casualty of the storm, and swung it with all her strength at Darius as he charged toward her. The branch connected with his shoulder, spinning him around. His gun went flying, landing in the dust. Caleb's warning shout mixed with Travis's curse as the gunman went for his weapon, but Caleb was faster. His shot caught Travis in the shoulder, sending him staggering back, his own gun falling from nerveless fingers. The three hired guns, seeing their employer down and their leader wounded, made the calculation that smart hired guns always make: survival beat payment. They turned their horses and rode hard for the road, leaving their wounded companions behind. Sam was up now, his rifle trained on Darius, who was on his knees in the dirt, clutching his shoulder where Isabel had hit him. The older man was crying, Isabel realized with shock. Actually crying, tears streaming down his florid face. "You're just like your mother," he sobbed. "Ungrateful, defiant. She thought she was better than me too. Thought she could look at me with those judgmental eyes and make me feel small. But I showed her. I showed her who was in charge." The words were a confession, clear and damning, and Isabel felt something inside her finally break free. The last chain that had bound her to him, to fear of him, to any belief that she'd somehow deserved what had happened to her. "You're right," she said, her voice calm now, almost peaceful. "I am just like my mother, strong enough to survive you, brave enough to fight back, and smart enough to make sure everyone knows exactly what you are." The sound of hoofbeats announced new arrivals. Sheriff Dawson rode into the yard with 4 deputies, their faces grim. Behind them came Sarah and her husband Tom, and several other townspeople from Copper Ridge, all armed, all looking ready for trouble. "Sheriff," Caleb said, not lowering his gun, "about time you got here. Tom Fletcher came to get me as soon as he saw Grant and his men riding this way." Dawson dismounted, taking in the scene with experienced eyes. "Looks like things got resolved without us, though." "Not quite resolved," Eleanor said, finally lowering her rifle. "Pete needs a doctor. They pistol-whipped him when he tried to stop them from surrounding the house. And that piece of trash," she gestured at Travis Keene, who was sitting in the dirt, holding his bloody shoulder, "needs to be arrested for trespassing, assault, and attempted kidnapping." "Darius Grant, too," Isabel added, her voice shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "He just confessed to killing my mother. Everyone heard it." Dawson looked at Darius, whose face had gone ashen as he realized what he'd said, who had heard it. "That true, Grant? You confessing to murder?" "I didn't. She fell. It was an accident. He said he showed her who was in charge," Sam spoke up, rubbing his wrists where he'd been restrained. "Said Mrs. Grant thought she was better than him, and he showed her. That's what he said, word for word." The sheriff nodded slowly, then gestured to his deputies. "Take them both into custody. Grant for murder and assault, Keene for assault and attempted kidnapping. We'll sort out the rest at trial." As the deputies moved to arrest Darius and Travis, Isabel felt her legs go weak. Caleb was there instantly, his arm around her waist, holding her up. "I've got you," he murmured. "It's over now. It's finally over." But Isabel wasn't sure it was over. Not completely. Not until she saw Darius in chains being lifted onto a horse by the deputies, his face empty of everything except defeat. Not until Travis Keene was secured as well, his swagger gone, replaced by the grim recognition that his wound would probably cost him his gun hand, even if he survived the trial. Sarah rushed to Isabel's side, pulling her into a fierce hug that Caleb reluctantly released her for. "You were so brave," Sarah whispered. "I can't believe you stood up to him like that." "I had to. I couldn't let him hurt anyone else because of me." The crowd of townspeople began to disperse, the danger past, though many stopped to shake Caleb's hand or offer words of support to Isabel. Mrs. Gus Henderson from the Mercantile pressed a basket of food into Eleanor's hands. The blacksmith offered to help repair anything damaged in the confrontation. The community, Isabel realized, had come together to protect one of their own. She was one of their own now. Not just Caleb's wife in name, but a true member of Copper Ridge, accepted and defended. The doctor arrived to tend to Pete, declaring his head injury not serious but requiring rest. He also looked at Travis Keene's shoulder, professional duty demanded it, and pronounced that the gunman would live, though he'd never shoot straight again with that arm. As the sun set and the last of the visitors departed, Isabel found herself standing on the porch with Caleb, watching Sheriff Dawson ride away with his prisoners. The ranch was quiet again, peaceful in the golden evening light. "Is it really over?" she asked, hardly daring to believe it. "It's really over. Grant will hang for murder." That confession sealed his fate. "Keene will spend years in prison if he's lucky. And you're free, Isabel. Completely, legally, permanently free." "Free." She tested the word, rolling it around in her mouth like something precious. I don't think I've ever been free before. Not really. Even before Darius, I was constrained by what was proper, what was expected. But now you can be whatever you want to be. Caleb turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. You can teach if you want, or ranch if you prefer, or find some completely different dream. You can stay married to me, or once Grant's convicted, you can seek an annulment and start fresh somewhere else. The choice is yours, Isabel. For the first time in your life, the choice is completely yours. The offer was generous, painfully so, and Isabel saw the fear in Caleb's eyes even as he made it, the fear that she'd take him up on it, that she'd leave now that she didn't need his protection anymore. You're an idiot, Caleb Holt, she said, but her voice was gentle, affectionate. Do you really think I'd leave? After everything we've been through, everything we've built together? I think you deserve the choice. You married me out of desperation, not desire. Now that the desperation is gone, the desire isn't. Isabel moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his hazel eyes, close enough to feel his breath on her face. I choose you, Caleb. Not because I need saving, not because I'm grateful, but because somewhere between hiding behind your barn and standing up to Darius today, I fell completely, irrevocably in love with you. His breath caught, his hands tightening on hers. Isabel, I love you, she said again, stronger now, more certain. I love your kindness and your honor and the way you try so hard to do the right thing, even when it costs you. I love how you look at me like I'm something precious. I love that you gave me back my life. And now I want to spend that life with you. Not because I have to, but because I choose to. Every day, for the rest of my life, I choose you. Caleb made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob, and then he was kissing her, really kissing her. Not the chaste peck from their wedding day, but something deep and passionate and full of all the feelings they'd both been holding back. Isabel melted into him, her arms coming up around his neck, kissing him back with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. I love you too. God, Isabel. I've loved you almost from the beginning, but I was so afraid to say it, so afraid you'd feel trapped. I've never been less trapped in my life. I'm free, and I'm choosing to use that freedom to love you. Eleanor's voice drifted from the doorway, amused and warm. You two planning to come inside for supper, or should I just leave it on the porch for you? They broke apart, laughing, both of them flushed and happy. Caleb kept his arm around Isabel's waist as they moved toward the door, unwilling to let her go even for the few steps it took to enter the house. That night, after supper, and after Eleanor had retired to her room with a knowing smile, Caleb walked Isabel to her bedroom door, as he had every night since their wedding. But this time, when she turned to say goodnight, she kept hold of his hand. You don't have to go, she said quietly. If you don't want to. I know we said we'd take things slowly, but Caleb, I'm your wife. Really your wife now, not just on paper. And I want... She felt her cheeks heat. I want to be your wife in every way. Are you sure? There's no rush, Isabel. We have all the time in the world now. I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything. She tugged him gently into the room, closing the door behind them. I want this. I want you. What followed was tender and sweet, and nothing like the violence Isabel had witnessed in Darius's household. Caleb was patient and careful, treating her like she might break, until she laughingly told him she was stronger than she looked. The night they shared was full of whispered words and gentle touches, of learning each other's bodies and hearts, of crossing the final threshold from arrangement to true marriage. Afterward, lying in Caleb's arms with her head on his chest, Isabel felt something she'd never experienced before, complete and utter contentment. She was safe, she was loved, and she was free. The bruised girl who'd hidden behind the barn was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her own strength and worth. What are you thinking? Caleb asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. That I want to testify at the trial, against Darius. I want to stand up in court and tell everyone what he did to my mother, what he did to me. I want to make sure he never hurts anyone ever again. It will be hard. Having to relive it all, having to face him. I know, but I need to do it. Not just for my mother's memory, but for myself. I need to look him in the eye as a free woman and tell the truth." She tilted her head to look up at him. "Will you be there with me? Every moment. I'll be right there beside you, and if you need to stop, if it becomes too much, we'll stop. But Isabel," he pressed a kiss to her forehead, "I believe in you. You're the strongest person I've ever met. If anyone can do this, it's you." The trial came 6 weeks later, held in the territorial courthouse in Helena. The journey took 3 days, with Caleb, Isabel, and Eleanor traveling together, Sheriff Dawson and his deputies transporting the prisoners separately. Sarah and Tom came as well, offering moral support, as did several other residents of Copper Ridge who'd witnessed either the confrontation at the ranch or Darius's behavior in town over the years. The courtroom was packed, people drawn by the scandalous nature of the case. A man accused of murdering his wife and terrorizing his stepdaughter, finally brought to justice by her testimony. Isabel wore her best dress, the blue one with lace that she'd been married in, and she held her head high as she took the witness stand. The prosecutor was a sharp-eyed woman named Catherine Wells, one of the few female lawyers in the territory, and she guided Isabel through her testimony with professional compassion. Isabel told everything. Her mother's marriage to Darius, the gradual revelation of his cruelty, the years of abuse, the morning she'd finally run. She described the beatings, the isolation, the fear that had ruled her life. And she told them about her mother's death, about the bruises Isabel had seen when preparing her body for burial, about the suspicious circumstances that everyone had been too polite or too afraid to question. Darius's lawyer tried to discredit her, suggesting she was lying to cover her own theft, implying she was an ungrateful stepdaughter seeking revenge. But Isabel didn't waver. She answered every question calmly and clearly, her voice never breaking even when she wanted to cry. The turning point came when the prosecutor asked about Darius's confession at the ranch. Isabel recounted his exact words, and then Sheriff Dawson took the stand to corroborate her account. Sam testified as well, and Eleanor, and even Tom Fletcher, who'd arrived in time to hear the tail end of Darius's tirade. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. They found Darius Grant guilty of murder in the first degree and multiple counts of assault. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s who'd clearly seen too many cases like this, sentenced him to hang. Darius screamed as they led him away, cursing Isabel, cursing Caleb, cursing everyone who'd testified against him. But his curses had no power anymore. He was just a broken, violent man facing the consequences of his actions. Travis Keene received 15 years at hard labor for assault and attempted kidnapping. The hired guns who'd fled were wanted for questioning but had vanished into the territory, likely never to be seen in those parts again. Outside the courthouse, Isabel stood in the autumn sunshine and let the reality of it all wash over her. It was done. Truly, finally done. Darius would never hurt anyone again. Her mother's death had been avenged, and she was free to live her life without fear. Caleb appeared at her side, slipping his arm around her waist. "How do you feel?" "Light," Isabel said wonderingly. "Like I've been carrying a heavy weight for years, and someone finally lifted it off my shoulders. Is this what freedom feels like?" "This is what it feels like. Get used to it, Mrs. Holt." They returned to Copper Ridge as the leaves turned gold and red, as autumn settled over Montana with its crisp mornings and warm afternoons. Life on the ranch continued its steady rhythm, but Isabel was part of that rhythm now, not just a guest or a charity case, but a true partner. She did eventually start teaching, working with the children of Copper Ridge 3 days a week in the small schoolhouse. She discovered she had a gift for it, for making lessons come alive, for seeing potential in students others had given up on. The children loved her, and their parents respected her, and Isabel found joy in work that fed her soul as well as her mind. But she always came home to the ranch, to Caleb, to the life they were building together. They talked about having children of their own someday, about expanding the ranch, about growing old together in the house where she'd once sought refuge. 2 years after the trial, on a morning when spring was just beginning to touch the Montana landscape with green, Isabel stood in the barn brushing down Copper, her horse now, a gift from Caleb, when she felt arms come around her from behind. "Good morning, Mrs. Holt," Caleb murmured against her ear. "Good morning, husband." She leaned back against him, savoring the solid warmth of his body against hers. "Did Eleanor tell you the news?" About the baby? She might have mentioned it, multiple times, with excessive enthusiasm. His hands moved to her still flat stomach, cradling it gently. Are you happy? I'm terrified and thrilled and, yes, incredibly happy. Isabel turned in his arms to face him. Can you believe it? Us, parents, a family. I can believe it. You're going to be an amazing mother, Isabel. Our children will be so loved, so safe. Nothing like what you grew up with. Nothing like what you lost either. We're going to give them everything, Caleb. Love and safety and the freedom to be themselves. She pressed her hand over his where it rested on her stomach. A chance at the life we both deserved, but had to fight so hard to find. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms in the barn where their story had begun, where a broken, desperate girl had hidden behind weathered wood, and a kind man had found her and offered her more than shelter. He'd offered her a future, a choice, a life worth living. Outside, the Montana sun climbed higher in the cloudless sky, warming the earth, promising new growth, new possibilities. The bruised girl who'd once cowered in shadows was gone, transformed into a woman who stood tall in the light, loved, free, and home at last. And in the house beyond the barn, Eleanor hummed as she worked, already planning for the grandchild who would fill these rooms with laughter, who would grow up knowing only love and security, who would be living proof that sometimes the darkest moments give way to the brightest futures. The cowboy had found his bride behind a barn, had called her his own when she needed it most, and together they'd built something beautiful from the ashes of pain and fear. Their story, like all the best love stories, had been written in courage and sealed with choice. The choice to keep trying, to keep believing, to keep loving even when the world seemed determined to break them. And they lived that story every day, choosing each other over and over again, proving that sometimes salvation comes not in grand gestures, but in the simple, profound act of one person seeing another's worth and refusing to let them fall. The barn door stood open to the morning light, no longer a place of hiding, but a symbol of beginning, of the moment when everything changed, when a desperate girl's prayer was answered, when a lonely man's heart remembered how to hope. And if you stood very still and listened closely, you might hear the echo of that first meeting, that first kindness, reverberating through the years that followed like a promise kept, a vow fulfilled, a love story that began with fear and ended with joy. This was their legacy, their truth, their triumph. That love, real love, sees you at your worst and chooses you anyway. That home isn't a place, but a person. That freedom, once won, tastes sweeter than anything else in the world. And that sometimes, just sometimes, the girl hiding behind the barn finds not just safety, but everything her heart was ever searching for.